Hey, there we go. Raw. Big Godzilla. Raw. So my review was delayed. It's coming out tomorrow. Schedules. At least I have the toys. Raw. This one's pretty big. And yes, there is a new movie coming out next year. In theory. I mean, you know, as much as you can believe any of these things these days. So you can battle them out. Raw. Well, you know what? There's got to be some kind of change in the movie because King Kong is canonically 25 feet tall. So I don't know how he's supposed to go up against Godzilla, who is hundreds of feet tall. So we'll have to see what happens. You think something enlarges Kong in the movie to true kaiju status? We'll have to wait and see. It's interesting though. Toy company Playmates took over the Godzilla license last year. They've been reissuing some toys already, but these are all from Playmates instead of some of the other companies that have been doing Godzilla toys, at least here in the United States, of course. In Japan, there's still stuff from Bandai and everything. Hey, Squirrel! And Dover, welcome everybody. Playing with toys a little bit. So yeah, so Playmates sent me the 4 of the new Godzilla vs. Kong toys. Movie coming out next year, but these are, in theory, these are already out at Walmart for whoever's going to Walmart these days. Not me. And then there's also little ones. This one's actually pretty cool because it's essentially an action figure of Kong. Raw. And then there's also a little Godzilla. Strangely, the little Godzilla is very dark colored, very different from the big one. Yeah, that makes sense. Something to boost him up. I don't know. I mean, they have to tie it into the whole mythology from the last Godzilla movie of the Titans and how those interact with like primordial Earth stuff. I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of that movie. Monster designs were cool, but the humans just get in the way. Actually, what's kind of cool is at least these 2 figures have, watch. So Kong comes up with his axe, and then look at that, gruesome. So it's kind of cool. Kong has the same thing on his shoulder. Bloody. 2014 Godzilla. That one was okay. It was alright. King of Monsters. Like I said, it had some cool kaiju stuff, but then it's like just fast forward through the humans talking endlessly. I don't know. People liked it. It made money. Enough, apparently, to continue this whole MonsterVerse thing. We'll see what that turns into. Are we gonna start getting, you know, Mothra movies and Rodan movies in the MonsterVerse? I doubt it, but that'd be cool. Yeah, a lot of pointless human nonsense. You watch Screen Rant's, what's that series? The Pitch Meeting series. I forget the guy's name who does it. Ryan George, is that it? On YouTube. Those are really funny. I get a big kick out of those. But he did one for that movie that was really good. I highly recommend the Pitch Meeting YouTube videos. Cool. Well, it is Thursday. So yesterday we did some Warhammering. Built us up a Primaris Chaplain on a bike. So we did that guy yesterday. Games Workshop let us know this morning about the next the next batch of codexes that are coming out for the rest of the year, including including some mystery things. Yeah, we really need Mothra though. Mothra's so cool. Hey, Warhammering can definitely be dirty. It's not always dirty, but it can be. Yeah, and then there's we know there's a big preview coming Saturday morning that has to do with Blood Bowl and some other stuff, so there'll be plenty of things to talk about after that happens. All right. Shall we do some more reading in Ovid's Metamorphoses? So if you remember from Monday, or if you were here, we're reading about the stories now of Jason and Medea. Now, yes, we did read, or we went through the Argonautica before, so some of this is recap and review, but death card again, gross. So this is a little bit of like the Roman take, and emphasizing different parts of the story than what we saw in the Argonautica. So last time we read about the magic that Medea is doing. And we had a lot of the number 3, very important, right? Triple this, triple that, 3, 3, 3. Mothra is always super cool. I love Mothra. I have some really cool Mothra toys of the different designs that she's gone through over the years. Like I said, one day I'll do that for my Toy Tuesday stream. Actually, most of that stuff is in a box. I could just like bring out the box and pull stuff out of it. So Medea is doing magic. She's got the 3. Everything is 3s. She makes this potion because Jason tells her, "Oh, my dad, he's so old. What can you do for him?" So she makes up the potion. They slit his throat, drain all of his blood, and fill him back up with the potion. And boom, he's 40 years younger. Sounds pretty cool, right? So let's see. So then, all right. So now they got to advance the story, or Ovid's going to advance the story. She says, "Mischief is hard, it seems, to put an end to. Medea feigning trouble with her husband." So here, just pretending, even though we know from the original story that they do end up having lots of trouble. Fled as a suppliant to the house of Peleus, whose daughters, since the king was old, received her with welcome, and she in cunning ways deceived them with a false show of friendship. So if you remember the original show, in the original Argonautica, they are scheming to go back home and take over from Peleus. So Medea is pretending to have troubles with Jason and goes to seek shelter with Peleus. She told them stories about her magic, dwelling on her prowess in making Aeson young, and Peleus' daughter began to hope that by Medea's magic their father might have green youth again. I'd like some green youth again. They pleaded, begged her to name her price. How great? No matter. Medea seemed to take some time about it, keeping them in suspense, a serious business, but finally gave her promise. "And," she said, "to give you better proof, I bid you bring me the oldest ram in the flock, and watch me make him a lamb again." A woolly ram was brought her, worn down with years no man could count, the horns curving around the hollow of his temples. She cut his skinny throat, and the blade of the knife was hardly red, so little blood was in him. She threw the carcass in a deep bronze kettle with powerful herbs and juices, and the body shrank, and the horns grew smaller, and the years melted away, or seemed to, and a thin bleeding simmered inside the kettle, and out came jumping a little lamb, all skippity-hop, all eager to find a milky udder. Peleus' daughters believed, if not their eyes, at least her promise, urged action on her, and 3 days went by, 3 nights went shining by, and Medea, slyly, built a quick fire under another cauldron, but this had nothing but clear water in it, no powerful herbs at all. A sleep like death held Peleus, held his guardians, a sleep like death caused by her magic spells and incantations. The daughters with Medea entered the chamber, standing around his bed. "You sluggish creatures, why do you dawdle now?" Medea asked them. "Draw swords, Let his old blood out, or how can I fill up his veins with youth? It is in your hands, his life, his season. Where is your devotion? Where are your silly hopes? Perform your duty. Take his old age away. The sword can do it. The sword can let the old blood flow. Each sister struck with perverse devotion. Never a one could watch the blow strike home. Each turned her eyes. Blind girls with cruel hands, they struck. And, bleeding, he had strength enough to raise himself a little. Try to leave the bed. What are you doing, daughters? He cried. What arms you to this purpose? A father's murder. All their might and spirit failed them. What more he might have said had Medea ended with the knife at the throat and the mangled body drowning in the boiling water. Yikes. And so if you remember in the Argonautica, when it comes to this part, Medea, again, it's essentially the same thing, but she cuts up the animal, puts it in the cauldron, and adds all of her special herbs and spices, and essentially turns it into a magic potion. And the animal jumps out again, young, and then has Peleus's daughters cut him up, put him in there, but she doesn't add anything magical, and they're just looking in this stew, and it's just a dad stew, and nothing happens. Because again, here it's just water. There's no magical elements at all. There's boiling up dad. And this she would have paid for had not her dragon car been there to take her swift through the air, past Pelion's shade and Othrys, regions well known because of old Carambus, whom the nymphs helped in time of flood, uplifted on wings before blah, 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 blah. All right, so essentially, she did the deed. She's hightailing it out of there. Yeah, he's going to be extra delicious after this. She goes traveling all across the world, and we get all of these like little teeny tiny stories. She saw Tempe. That was the place where Cygnus became a swan. Phileus, the story ran, had taken orders from him, tamed wild birds and a lion at his bidding, and brought them to him. And Cygnus was not satisfied, and told him to tame a wild bull also. And he did it, but would not give the bull to Cygnus, sorry at having his love refused. You will be sorry, Cygnus cried out, and leaped from a cliff. All men thought he had fallen, but on snowy wings he floated in midair. So again, we have, if Ovid has a chance, he's going to cram in a bunch of little stories in between these larger ones, and they're all going to have some sort of transformation in it. So again, and a lot of bird transformations. So this is how, basically how the swan came to be, from a character named Cygnus. Let's see. So Medea flies on to Piera's Springs. Jason, by then, had a new bride. Medea killed her with burning poisons, and dyed the sword red in her children's blood, a dreadful vengeance, and fled from Jason's fury, borne aloft once more on dragon wings, and came to Athens. Oh, birds are certainly magic, yes. So then we skip ahead in the story a little bit chronologically. As you know, if you remember, Medea does end up in Athens later on in her story, and then interacts a little bit with Theseus, the next hero. And now came Theseus, son of Aegeus, a stranger to his own father, though from sea to sea well known as a hero. But Medea loathed him. She brewed a poison for him. She had brought it long since from Scythian shores. It once had dripped from a dog's jaws, that Cerberus, the hound of hell's dark cavern. Cerberus, the hound whom Hercules here dragged up in chains of iron, while the great dog, fighting, turned his eyes away from daylight's flashing radiance. All 3 throats bathed in his fury, and from his triple jowls white foam dripped on the fields of green, and grew, men say, and thrived in the rich strong soil, and gained the power to hurt. Such noxious weeds they are, they will even grow on rocks, and people call them the flower of stoniness. I don't know if that's a specific plant they're referring to, quite possibly. Zardos, that's an interesting question. Yeah, because there are, like we've talked about, most, but not all of the Indo-European cultures that arose in their religions have a sky god central to their religion. Not all of them, but yeah, I mean, you got to look up, right? So many cool things happen up, and birds are definitely connected to what's going on above the world. I mean, we get that specifically. Aristophanes was one of the Greek tragedians who wrote comedies, and really the only one we have extant, his plays, like entire plays of his. So there are, I forget how many Aristophanes plays we have, but they're really interesting. They're really weird. They're not all super funny. They're not like what we would think of as a comedy, but they definitely have comedic elements. And it ranges some really silly slapstick stuff all the way to really biting political satire. But one of them is the birds, and essentially it's a story of the birds are bummed because we worship the gods who are up in Olympus, and we offer all of these sacrifices to them. And the birds are like, well, screw that. We are above humans. We should be honored. So they make a cloud kingdom called Cloud Cuckoo Land, which you may know from the Lego movie, which they took from ancient Greek stories. And basically they make their own kingdom in between Earth and Olympus, and they literally capture the sacrifices as they go up to Olympus, which is kind of cool. And yeah, Squirrel, Cerberus is just a punching bag for heroes, primarily. It's pretty sad. He seems so fearsome, and yet he's always getting beaten up or put to sleep or dragged somewhere where he's not supposed to be. Yeah, poor Cerberus. So anyway, the idea is that yes, Hercules dragged Cerberus up into the above world. His saliva dripped down onto rocks and grew this poisonous plant. This was the poison Aegeus, through the cunning of his wife, gave to his son to drink, a father treating his son as an enemy. He had taken the cup, raised it, when Aegeus noticed on his scabbard emblems familiar to him, and struck the death from his son's lips. And once again Medea rode in a whirling cloud of magic darkness out of the reach of death. So we're cramming a whole bunch of stories in here together. But again, if you remember, Aegeus had traveled from Athens, and there was a prophecy about he was going to have an heir and all blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so he ended up impregnating a woman on his travels, left his sword and sandals there sort of as a token, said when he's old enough he can move the rock and get him, blah, blah, blah. Came back to his court, 16, 18 years later, and gives him the poison to drink at Medea's behest. And then as Theseus is lifting it up to drink, Aegeus sees the sword and it's like, oh, wait, that's my sword, and then slaps the cup out of his hands, saves him from drinking poison. Yeah, Aristophanes it's like I said, it's really interesting. It's just so far removed from our modern sensibilities, especially of comedy, that it can be sometimes difficult to get into. I thought about doing some Greek comedy on our, like when I've done the when it's my turn for Homebuddies group streams on Saturday, and we may still in the future. Like we are looking at Lysistrata. That one's a little bit more approachable. The idea of a sex strike is a funny story no matter when you're talking about it. But yeah, the other ones they're kind of dense. The frogs has some cool stuff in it too. It's clouds, the wasps, they're all really interesting. But yeah. So Medea, that plan fails. She's off. But yeah, so then we're gonna dive into the stories of Theseus. So we're gonna move on. Medea, out of the picture. She's out. So we have Theseus. There's a celebration. Let's see. Sharing in song and wine and celebration. Hail Theseus, most mighty! Marathon gives praise for the killing of the bull from Crete and chromium's farmers owe their fearless tillings to the work of your great hands. And Epidaurus adds praise for the death of that club-swinging menace, the son of Vulcan, and Cephisus River is happy for the slaying of Procrustes, and Ceres' town Eleusis gives rejoicing for Cercyon's death. So it's, again, cramming all of these stories into just brief references, mainly because there are no transformations in them, so Ovid's not going to spend a lot of time. But part of Theseus's heroic journey, and that we've seen with Hercules and some other characters, is that once you become a hero, you go and defeat a bunch of monsters. And that's what Theseus did in the lands around Athens. He just went from town to town, beating up monsters and brigands and other things to civilize the area. So that's what all of these brief little references are. Squirrel, that is a very good point. But yes, it's that one's a classic. But again, the plan is that we will be doing that one on a future Homebuddies stream, because that's a favorite of Emma's as well. So look forward to that probably next month. So all the palace rang with loud rejoicing, homage and laud, and never a trace of sorrow in the town. And yet... killing Procrustes was a stretch. I get it. I like it. And yet, how often it happens, no joy is ever complete, and sorrow always intrudes on happiness. So, to Aegeus, rejoicing had an anxious cloud above it. Minos was threatening war. He was strong in soldiers, stronger in sailors, strongest in thirst for vengeance over his son Androgeos slain. More allies were what he craved, and over the seas he found them. And then he has a bunch of allies. We don't need to get into it. And then, again, like we've talked about in epic poetry, sometimes they go off on a list of things because it's like, look at all the names I know and all the names I can remember and recite. So we have that here. Essentially, there's a war going on between Athens and the island of Crete, King Minos or Minos. These were some islands which did not help the Cretans. Tenos and Andros, Didymai, Olarios, Gyaros, Peparethos, shining with olives. These Minos gave wide birth to. Skip ahead a little bit. So yeah, essentially they're going out and recruiting allies in this war, just like more modern day wars. If two major powers are fighting, what's a really good way of having that combat without risking your own lives? Go and recruit much smaller city-states to do the conflict for you. So they're going to fight. There's meetings. So there are raids happening. Let me get on to the next important story. Oh my goodness, there's a lot here. Okay, let's go here. Sorry, just making sure I get to the start of the next big story. Yeah, so they're bringing people in. Let's see. So the sons of Pallas attending Cephalus went to the king, but Aeacus was sleeping, and Phocus was the one who gave them welcome as they drew near the threshold. The other princes were marshaling the warriors. Phocus led them in. They sat down together, and Phocus noticed the javelin Cephalus carried, with head of gold, and a shaft made out of wood he did not know. There was a little idle conversation, broken by Phocus. I am fond of hunting, he said. I know the woods, but I have never seen such a shaft. I'm curious about it. Surely if it were ash, it would be yellow. If it were cornel, knotty. What it comes from, I do not know. I do know I have never seen one more beautiful or better balanced. He's really into this other guy's shaft. One of the brothers answered, You will wonder more at its use than its beauty. Always it flies unfailing to the mark you aim it. Chance never guides its flight, and it comes flying with blooded barb back to the hand that flung it. Then Focus, more than ever, kept asking questions. Why was it so? Where did it come from? Who had been the giver of such a prized possession? Cephalus answered all except one question. What had it cost him? For a while in silence he grieved for his lost wife, and then with tears began the story. So this is the story of Cephalus and Procris. Do I read mythology? I have, yeah. We have a couple of like kid versions of mythological stories. Although my son could tell you, inevitably I'll read a section and then like stop the book and explain like, well, really what it is, and then go off on some slightly more adult tangents, and then try to balance that out with the language that's appropriate for a 4 or 5 year old. But yes, we have done. We have read mythology to the little ones. This weapon makes me weep. It will make me weep as long as ever I live. Would I had never owned it, the destruction of my dear wife, of both of us together. Her name was Procris, or, if you have heard of Orythia, the ravished Orythia. My Procris was her sister, and, if you ask me, more worthy of ravishment than Orythia. Interesting. Her father, King Erechtheus, joined her to me. Love joined her to me. People called me happy, and I was happy, or lucky, but the gods had other ideas about it, or I might be happy to this day. We had been married only 2 months, and I was out one morning spreading my nets for the wide-antlered deer, when the golden goddess of the morning saw me from the top of Mount Hymettus, where the flowers are always blossoming. The golden goddess, the dawn, who drives the shadows away, beheld me, carried me off against my will. So so here we have an actual story of a goddess raping a mortal, a man. She may forgive me for telling the truth, but I loved Procris. I was in love with Procris. Though Aurora is surely lovely with the blush of roses shining upon her, holding the double portals of day and night, and nourished by the nectar. In silence and in speech I worshipped Procris, kept talking always of her, of our marriage, of our first night together, till the goddess was angry at me. You ungrateful fellow, stop your complaining, keep your precious Procris. Still, if I know one thing about the future, you will come to wish that you had never had her. And so she sent me home, in rage and anger, and as I went, I did a little thinking, turning over in my mind the goddess's warning. I began to be afraid. Had Procris kept her marriage vows? Her beauty and her youth pointed one way, her character another. Ugh, that's super cringy, but she's young and so beautiful, so surely she must not be faithful and not have good character, but she is. Still, I had been away. I was returning from one who has no paragon of virtue, and as a man in love, besides, is always fearful. So I decided to give myself a reason to have a grievance. I would test her honor with costly gifts. In this Aurora helped me, changing my form. I seemed to feel the change, and so, unrecognized, I came to Athens, entered my house. The house itself seemed blameless, no sign of anything wrong, but only anxious for its lost master. Using 1,000 ruses, all kinds of trouble, I came at last to Procris, and when I saw her, wanted to abandon the silly test. It was not easy for me not to confess the truth, and not to kiss her, as she deserved being kissed. She was sorrowful, but never was a woman lovelier in sorrow than Procris, longing for her husband. Imagine, Focus, how beautiful she was, her very sorrow most becoming to her. What use is there in telling you how often her chastity rejected my temptations? I keep myself for one, she would always tell me. Wherever he is, I save my pleasure for him. What more could any sensible man have wanted? I was not satisfied. I kept on fighting to wound myself. I promised her a fortune for just one night. And as I doubled the promise, I made her hesitate. And then, victorious, wickedly so, exclaimed, "Ha! Evil woman! I was no real seducer, but your husband, both witness and detective." She said nothing, never a word, but a shamed and beaten woman fled from her treacherous husband and his house, and hating him and all the race of men, went wandering the mountains, all devoted to the worship of Diana, virgin huntress. I was lonely, and in my passion burned the fiercer in loneliness. I pleaded for her pardon, confessed that I had sinned and might have yielded, as she had, if such gifts were offered to me. There was, it seemed, some satisfaction for her in my confession. She came back to me, and so we spent delightful years together. As though the gift of her sweet self was nothing, she brought me more, a hunting hound Diana had given her, the swiftest of all in coursing, and the javelin you see here in my hands. The story of both gifts is worth repeating. So we have this super gross story, right? Cephalus is seized, kidnapped by the goddess Aurora, the goddess of the dawn, and he's so devoted to his wife and talks about her all the time that Aurora's like, "Fine, just go home. I don't even want you around anymore." But as he goes home, he thinks, I've been away for a little while. Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Squirrel. Let's say. I will send you the link to the... There's a link I will send you very shortly. So he decides, I am going to test my wife because I don't trust her. I don't trust that she's been faithful while I've been gone. So he goes home in disguise. And we don't hear like what he was disguised as, but the goddess helped him to be in disguise. And he pretends he's somebody else. And it's basically indecent proposal, right? He offers her a bunch of money and then even more. And then finally she's like, okay, whatever. And then he says, aha, I tricked you. She runs off fleeing into the woods. Eventually he's able to get her to come back. And he apologizes, and they are, nicely, at least in this story, they are able to reconcile. He says, look, I would have, same thing would have happened to me. I would have given in, and they are able to spend some time together again, which is nice. And she even brings him gifts. A special dog and this javelin, this spear with the amazing shaft. And now we're going to get the story of where that actually came from. So it's a metamorphosis story within a metamorphosis story. Although, again, the metamorphosis here was just Cephalus being in disguise. But hey, sure, he changed. Let me grab this link. Can I just get this link here? Okay. Hold on, where'd it go? So what would it mean if I click on somebody, click on whisper, and then nothing happens? Does it go somewhere else? Yeah, I mean, at least they got back together briefly. Squirrel, you don't exist. I click on your name. It brings up the little window. I click on whisper, and then it just closes. I don't want to block you. I don't want to report you. I don't want to ban or... Wow, that's so weird. I will message it to you in another way. That's so strange. I'll Discord the thing to you. But thank you so much. It will happen, I promise. Okay, so we're gonna get the backstory to this part, and we're gonna get it through some other people that you might have heard of. Very briefly, we're just gonna make a mention of. Oh, Eridinsk, thank you very much. That is probably it. I don't have a lot of friends on Twitch because that doesn't seem to be something that's important. You whispered me. I promise I will get it figured out at the end of the show today. Oedipus, Laius' son, had solved the riddle no man had fathomed, and the Sphinx lay broken. But a second monster loosed itself on Thebes, and all the country dwellers fled in terror from that fierce beast that ravaged herds and people. We, young men all, came and spread wide our nets around the fields, but the monster overleapt them. We loosed the hounds. They might well have followed birds in the air. So then they came and asked me to turn my Laylaps loose. That was the name of the hound that Procris gave me. Laylaps. Is that one in the back here? Yeah. So again, he's got like this magical hunting dog that came from the goddess Diana. If you're a dog lover, things don't go well here. Just like for every character in this book. He was straining against the leash, against the strap that held him. We had hardly let him go when he was gone, out of our sight completely. The warm dust still held his footprints, but we could not see him. No spear was ever swifter, no arrow ever, no leaden bullets from the curved sling flying. I climbed a hilltop, watched the strange pursuit. The beast was almost caught in the grip of the jaws, then gone again, not running straight, but doubling, wheeling, eluding the charge, and Laylaps after him, has him, almost, then seems to have him, snapping at empty air. I got the javelin ready, poised it, looked down for a moment to fit my fingers into the thong, looked up and saw a wonder. 2 marble statues in the plain, one fleeing, one in pursuit, or so it seemed. Some god, if there ever was any god there, must have willed it, that neither one should lose. Okay, so a couple things real quick. First off, yes, this poor hunting dog, he goes running to chase this beast in the fields. Cephalus looks away for a minute to get ready to throw the javelin, looks back, and both the monster and poor Laylaps just turn to stone. It was such a magnificent, like perfect representation of the chase that some god just froze them in place, turned them to stone, and that's it. The poor dog. Now, you heard the mention of the thong, fitting his fingers into the thong. In ancient times, so you all know what a spear looks like. A javelin is sort of like a smaller version of a spear. Basically, I mean, you can go and look up pictures if you want, but a certain kind of javelin had a strap that was attached to the butt end that essentially what would happen is you would take the strap and you would wind it and hold it with your fingers. So when you threw it, you would get an extra bit of energy from whipping the thong as it was flying out of your hands. Yeah, it was sort of like a combination spear and sling, essentially. So yeah, that's what that part was about. Hey Janelle, good morning. We're reading about ancient thongs. And a dog just got turned to stone. Yeah, exactly, Zardoz. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, ancient thongs on javelins for throwing. And he fell silent. Focus began to prompt him, because again, we're in a story within a story. And the javelin? What could have been the matter with the javelin? So Cephalus went on, the matter focus. was that my grief began in happiness. What joy is it, O son of Aeacus, to call to mind that blessed time, those days when we were fortunate, she in her husband, I in my wife. We loved each other dearly, even Jove's embrace was less to her than mine was, and I would not have traded her for Venus, so equally each heart burned for the other. I was young then, I loved hunting, early mornings, when the sun came over the mountains, off I went to the deep wood, and no companions with me, no hound, no horse, no nets. I trusted fully in javelin alone. And when my hand had all the game it needed, I came back to the cool shadows. Wooing the breeze that came to cool and rest me, I even gave the breeze a name, Dear Aura, for that was what I called her. I remember. Dear Aura, come and comfort me. Receive me in your most welcome graces, and allay the heat I burn with. And I may have added further endearments, as my fate would have it, saying, You are my greatest joy, my comfort, my recreation, and I love the woods and solitudes because they bring you to me. How sweet your breath on lips and cheek, dear Aura. Now, can you possibly imagine why it might not be the wisest idea to go off in the woods by yourself to hunt, and then to give a name to the breeze that cools you, and then to out loud by yourself talk about this woman who you love so much, who's coming to you and soothing you and caring for you out in the woods while your wife is at home? Smart idea or not? Yeah, he deserves what to happen. And someone overheard me and thought Aura was the name of a girl or a nymph, and that I loved her, and ran to Procris with a reckless story of my unfaithfulness, told in a whisper how credulous love is. Procris believed it, fell in a faint, revived, and called herself unhappy, doomed unfairly, all the while complaining of my faithlessness, and driven by nothing more than idle talk, to fear nothing at all. An empty name, no more, as if a living woman was her rival. Still, she would doubt and hope, would not believe it. It would take more than a story to convince her, she said. She would not believe her husband guilty until she caught him in the act. So again, we actually see this couple does have some redeeming qualities. They do trust each other at least a little bit. They don't immediately fall for these either tricks or seeming deceptions. Next morning in the early light, I left the house again, hunting, and sought the woods, and the hunt was good. And I lay resting in the grass and called, Come to me, Aura. And I thought I heard a sigh or a moan in answer. Dearest, come, I cried, and the fallen leaves made a slight rustling. I thought I heard a beast and flung the javelin. It was Procris, not a beast, who cried in anguish. I knew her voice, rushed to the sound, and found her dying, her clothes all blood-stained. She was trying, poor thing, to pull from her wounded breast the weapon she once had given me. With loving arms I raised her body, so much dearer to me than was my own. I tore aside the robes, bound up the wound, and tried to staunch the blood, begging her not to leave me, with the guilt of her death for my curse. Her strength was going, but in her dying effort she could manage to speak a little. By the gods above, by my own gods, and by the bonds we shared in bed together, dearest husband, I beg you, if you ever had reason to love me, as I love you so much, so that my love has brought me death, never allow this Aura inside our room. And so I understood misunderstanding of the name, and made my explanation. But what good was explanation then? She fell back dying, her last strength going with her blood, but looking, while she could look at anything, at me, whose lips took her last breath, unhappy spirit. And yet her face seemed almost to be smiling. I think she died at peace. The story ended with everyone in tears as Aeacus entered with both his sons and the new soldiers strong in their armor for Cephalus to welcome. Yeah, that story didn't end well for anyone. Also interesting though, so we get the end of that story. No real transformation there, as in just about every story. I mean, again, we have little transformations within the stories within stories. Lilaps being turned into stone and all these other things, but that one's just like, here's a really sad story, which is kind of a downer. But again, though, with these characters, I mean, there's sort of the satisfaction that at least in her dying moments, they were able to understand the truth of what had led to her death, and at least she died without thinking that her husband was cheating on her. I guess that's a good thing. I mean, it's not terrible, I suppose, but yeah. So that's a sad one. Definitely a sad one. All right, and so that was the end of book 7. So now we get into book 8. Let's see. Ooh, the story of Nissus and Scylla. So there's there's this king name. Let me write out the names so you all have it. So this is going to be Nissus and Scylla. Now again, Scylla is a name you might have heard before, or if you remember when we read the Odyssey, or went through the Odyssey. Scylla, Scylla, you might hear it sometimes called. Scylla is obviously the more popular one. Scylla and Charybdis. So there's this king Nissus. On Nissus's head, among the honored grayness, there was growing one shining purple lock. This he must keep or lose his kingdom, so the legend had it. Okay, so I love stories like this, where Ovid just introduces a character, gives you something really bizarre about the character, and then is like, yeah, let's get into the story. So we have King Nissus, and he has one purple lock of hair. He's pretty cool. He's extra. And he must keep that purple lock of hair or lose his kingdom. All right, you hooked me. I'm ready to hear this story. 6 months, the moon had filled her horn with light, and still the fate of war hung in the balance, with victory on doubtful pinions hovering over both forces. The palace had a tower built on the singing walls, where once Apollo laid down his golden lyre, whose power of music still lingered in the stones. There, Nissus's daughter used to climb often in days of peace, and set the stones to chime by tossing pebbles at them. And now in days of war she would still go there to look on battles as the war dragged on. She had learned the names of the captains and their armor, horses and harness and the Cretan quivers. So again, this is the Nissus and his town are fighting against the Cretans. Cretans as in people from Crete, not like morons. Purple because of the connection to Roman royalty. I don't know. I think the purple here might actually predate that. Right, exactly. Cretans, not Cretans. So again, so the daughter of King Nissus goes up to the battlements to watch the battles happening outside, and she watches so much that she even learns all of the enemy's leaders. And most of all, she came to know their leader, Europa's son, much better than she needed. If Minos's head was hidden in a casque with crested plume, even hidden in a helmet, Minos was handsome in her eyes. If Minos carried a golden shield, the shield reflected the beauty of his going. If his muscles rippled to hurl a spear, the girl admired his strength, his skill. Or if he bent the bow with arrow knocked to the string, she would swear Apollo was standing there with arrows in his hand. But when he took the helmet off and rode bare-headed, robed in crimson on a steed milk white, with colored trappings, the bit foaming, she was hardly her own mistress, hardly able to keep her senses. Happy was the javelin he touched, happy the reins he held. She would have gone flying through the hostile lines, come leaping from tower to Cretan camp, swing open the bronze of the great gates, do anything for Minos. So she would sit there, gazing at the whiteness where the Cretan tents were spread, and listening to her own thoughts. War is a thing to weep for, I know, but whether to weep or smile, I know not. I grieve that Minos is the enemy of a girl who loves him. But if there were no war, I never would have known him. If he had me as hostage, he might put the war aside, have me as a pledge of peace and as a companion. The mother who bore him must indeed have been most lovely, and the god who burned for her had every reason. So, yeah. She has fallen in love with the king who is fighting her father's kingdom. Not going to be good. I would be thrice happy if I had wings to fly through the air, come down in the Cretan camp and tell my king I loved him. Ask him what price he would pay if he could ever have me. So he might ask my country as my dower. Not that. I know that I had better perish with all my hopes of marriage than win by treason. So she has a little bit of her senses still there. She doesn't want to win by treason. Still, there were times when people found it useful to lose, to find the conqueror merciful. He has justice on his side. His son was murdered, after all. Thrice armed is he who has his quarrel just. I think we shall be beaten. If that doom waits for our city, why should not my love unbar the walls before his violence? It would be better for him to win, and quickly, with no more killing, no further risk of bloodshed. And still I have no fear that anyone will wound you, Minos, except by accident. Who, even in war, would be so pitiless to fling his cruel spear at you on purpose? So she's in love. She's scheming. She's thinking, seems like we're going to lose anyway. So maybe there's a way we can have this all work out. I can get with Minos. He can, through me, we can negotiate peace. He's going to win anyway. It'll be great. Nobody else has to die. Her plan appeals to her. She is determined to end the war with her country as her dowry. Wishing will never do it, though. A watch stands guard at the entrance. My father holds the keys to the gates of the town. He is the only one I fear in my unhappiness. He only blocks what I pray for. If the gods would only grant that I had no father! But every person surely is his own god, and fortune has no use for the lukewarm prayer. And why should any girl be braver than I am? Any other girl would long ago, burning with love like mine, have swept away whatever it was opposed her, being glad to do it. Fire and sword are nothing, and here there is no need of fire and sword, only my father's lock of hair, more precious than all the gold in the world. That purple lock will make me happy, mistress of my prayer. Night came as she was speaking. Night, the soother of all anxieties. And with the darkness, her boldness grew. Oh man, I don't know about you, but when I'm laying in bed at night, my anxieties seem to grow, not go away. In the time of the first quiet, when sleep possesses day-worn hearts, the daughter steals silently into the father's chamber, cuts off the fatal lock, and with her entrance, with her treasure, sure of her welcome, makes her way to Minos, who shudders as he listens. Love has led me to do this thing. I, Scylla, Nisus' daughter, deliver to you my country, my household gods. I ask for no reward except yourself. Take as my pledge of love this purple lock, and realize that with it I am giving my father's life. And in her guilty hand she held his prize out to him. But the king shrank back, appalled. No gift, no deed like this had ever come his way before. He answered, "May the gods cast you out, and earth and ocean reject you, infamous daughter of our time. Never would I allow so vile a monster to touch my land of Crete, my world, the cradle of the infancy of Jove. Thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate that. So this poor girl falls in love with the king who is attacking her own city. She sneaks into her dad's room while he's sleeping, cuts off this magical lock of hair he has. We won't get into that. Brings it to King Minos, and Minos rejects her. Because again, like, it's that whole idea, right? If you know someone is a cheater, don't be with that person, because how can you expect them to do anything different? I'm not saying that people can't change, but that's the idea here. So the just king gave answer, and when his enemies were conquered, imposed just laws upon them, and gave orders to loose for home the bronze-bound ships, with rowers ready along the benches. And Scylla saw them swimming the seas, and saw that the king denied her guilt's reward, and saw that prayers were useless, and swung to anger. And with her hand stretched out, with her hair streaming down, in rage and passion cried out, "Do you leave me then? Leave me, who gave you success and victory? Leave me, who put you above my fatherland, above my father? Do you leave me, cruel king, in victory, thinking my guilt no service? Was the gift nothing at all? Were all the love and hope centered upon you nothing? Where am I to go now, deserted, back to my country? It lies beaten, it lies low. But even suppose it still remained, my treason has closed it to me. Go back to my father? But I have betrayed him. My people hate me, as they should. My neighbors fear my example. I have made myself an exile from all the world, for Crete alone to take me. If you forbid me Crete, and leave me here, I will know Europa never was your mother, but quicksands must have been, or evil whirlpools, or some Armenian tigress. You are no son of Jove. Your mother never was deluded by a bull's guise. That story of your birth was all a lie. Truth is, you were begotten by a real bull, a fierce, unnatural creature that could not find a heifer to his liking. Punish me, Father Nissus. Oh, rejoice in all I suffer, walls that I betrayed. I have deserved it. I am worthy to die. Let me be slain by those whom I have wronged. For why should you, O hypocrite, abuse me for crime that meant your victory? A crime against my fatherland, against my father, might be service in your eyes, if only those eyes were not so hard. You have a wife well mated to you, that unnatural woman whose cunning helped her have a bull for lover, whose womb conceived the hybrid monster offspring. Do you hear me, ingrate? Or do the winds that fill your sails blow off my words to emptiness? It is no wonder to me, no wonder Pasiphae preferred the bull to you. The bull was gentler. Gross. Woe is me, he orders his men to hurry, and the waves resound to the beat of the oars, to the land and I are fading out of sight. In vain, forgetter of my service, I shall follow you, against your will, cling to the curve of the stern, be towed through the long waters. And she leapt into the sea, swam after the ship, her passion giving her strength, clung to the Cretan vessel, unwanted, hateful. And her father saw her from high in the air. He had become an osprey with tawny wings, came swooping down upon her to tear her with his crooked beak in vengeance. And she, in terror, loosed her hold, and falling, was buoyed by the light air. She seemed a feather, she was all feathers. And now her name is Kiris, the bird whose name comes from the Greek for shearer. Now we did chip. Yes. So, okay, so a bunch of weird, crazy stuff happens at the end of that story. Minos, the drama. Thank you so much. So Minos does win. He does conquer because she cut off her dad's purple hair, which means he can be beaten. It's this whole thing. and she comes to him and says, I cut off the hair of my dad. Now you can have you can conquer us. And he's like, ew, I want nothing to do with you. You're crazy. You betrayed your father. You betrayed your country. Why would I want you exactly? So totally spurns her, but lets her live. Minos defeats the town, but then he heads off. He's going to go home. And she sees the ship sailing. She's so overwhelmed, all of this drama. She dives into the sea, swims up, is like, I'm coming with you. I really love you. And yes, her dad, who off screen has been turned into a bird, swoops down, attacks her, and then so she turns into a bird as well. So again, 2 more birds in this story. So many birds. So many birds. And now, or rather next, we'll get into it, but we're going to follow the story back to Crete and get some really good stories about what has been going on there. So yes, the next stories are going to be Daedalus and Icarus. Again, you might have heard that story before. And then the Caledonian Boar. What else is coming up here? The Brand of Meleager. We might skip that one. The Return of Theseus. Oh, Baucis and Philemon. Ooh, some really good ones coming up. But yeah, so not only do we have yeah, now if you're unfamiliar with some of the references that were in there as far as especially bulls, there are a lot of bulls that are involved in stories related to Crete and the people who live there. And some of them are super, well, they're all gross. Let's say they're all gross. Some of them slightly more gross than others. So the original one is Europa. Europa is one of the infinite people that Zeus, or again here Jupiter / Jove, fell in love with. Europa was out one day and Jupiter's like, how do I get her away from her family and do it not so that my wife sees, so I can have sex with her. So this was one that, yeah, Jupiter turned into a bull and he was, let me tell you, he was the most beautiful bull there ever was. A big white bull, but he looked so gentle. And Europa climbed on his back. He, excuse me, hold on one second. There was that great story that he was so gentle and his eyes looked so intelligent, and he seemed to entice her to get on his back. And so she did, and he flew away and took her off, and then eventually drops her off. And yeah, so then we have Minos' wife, Pasiphae with dots over the E, but a whole thing there. There are curses, there are issues with this family, but Pasiphae ends up falling in love with an actual bull and wants nothing more than to have sex with that bull. They can't get away from this curse, so they feed the curse. And they have Daedalus, again, who we're going to read about next time. Daedalus is basically the Da Vinci of the ancient world. He could do anything. Incredible inventor, engineer, machinist, you name it. So Daedalus builds for her a cow costume, a cow frame. She hides inside this cow, and the bull has sex with her. The child of this unnatural mating is, of course, the Minotaur, the bull of Minos, because Minos is the bull's stepdad, sort of, you could say, or the creature's stepdad. So yes, so the Minotaur, they are obviously horrified at this creature, and so yeah, Minos then has Daedalus build the labyrinth to hide the shame of this creature, hide the Minotaur in the labyrinth. Again, he can't. we always talk about like these really complex laws and sort of the different levels of crimes against humanity versus crimes against the gods. So Minos cannot kill the Minotaur because it is the son of his wife, so it's part of his family. He can't just murder it. He has to keep it alive. So he has Daedalus build the labyrinth, puts it in the labyrinth, and then has to feed it, people, because it's a monster. And then we get all the stories of Theseus and everything else. And then, of course, Minos then cannot let Daedalus just leave and potentially tell people about what has happened there, so locks up Daedalus on Crete. And that is where we're going to pick up next time. So yeah, some interesting, fun stories. We got some good, very brief, like actual morality tales today. How we don't get a lot of that in ancient mythology. Usually ancient mythological stories are more about, screwing somebody over or screwing over the gods, and then the gods take revenge. But here we actually saw a man and wife couple who, yes, they had problems, but they did try to listen to one another and learn from mistakes that happened. Things still end up going really poorly for them. Minos has, this girl come to him. She's young, she's beautiful. She overthrew her own father for him. We might expect him to welcome and embrace her and, lean into that. But instead, no, he rebuffs her and says, what you did was horrible. I'd rather not have won that way, but still he wins that way. But yeah, there is some like actual human morality, which we don't always get. Yeah. Will we hear some of those kind of things next time, or will we just hear gross people having sex with animals and transformations? We'll find out on Monday. So again, thanks everybody for watching. Tomorrow is Friday, so we'll be doing Figure Friday. We'll look at some non-Games Workshop and non-Warhammer miniatures. Probably continue with Robotech, the Robotech minis. I have almost done one of every Robotech miniature, so might as well continue with that. Just a couple more to go. Let me see if anybody's online to pop it over to. Ooh, Perception Studio's on. Let's raid them in a minute. Give me just 1 second, because actual Twitch is so slow. So slow. Thank you, Squirrel. Yeah, they're, again, like, it's Metamorphoses, it's a big book, but there's some really, like, truly timeless, great stories in here. And hopefully I'm adding some additional content, quality content to it, because they definitely, some of them need explanation and backstory to them. Raid channel. Yes, and absolutely, please go and vote. In fact, my wife and I, we have our ballots here. We're gonna fill them out and go drop them off today. Yes, vote early, vote often. We've got, okay, starting this raid. Okay, I'll get going in just a second. I have additional quality content. Well, thank you so much. I try. This has been great. I'll be back tomorrow with miniatures and fun modeling stuff, hobbying. Have a great day, everybody. It's almost the weekend, for whatever that means these days. All right. I'll see everybody tomorrow. Go say hi to Perception Studio. Bye.
Wait, today's Friday?
I said it's almost Friday.